Hey friends, hope the morning's treating you well. Hope you got your coffee. I got my coffee. I want to talk about Blaze Foley this morning. I posted a video yesterday. It was an interview with my buddy Girth and he talked about Blaze, his friendship with Blaze Foley. It's really good stuff. If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. Now, there's a lot of people who dig Blaze Foley who watch this channel, and I like sharing stuff because it seems to resonate with a lot of you very deeply. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but let me put down my coffee. I was thinking about Blaze about a month ago. I was driving. I forget where I was driving. It was a long distance drive from somewhere, and I was trying to think of what I wanted to listen to. And I'm going back and forth, and I thought, man, I haven't listened to any Blaze Foley in a while. And I never remember the name of his albums, but I remember the songs. And I'm putting on, it's probably live at the Austin Outhouse, and I'm listening to something live, and I believe it's Oval Room. As we get going, and it just, everything kind of clicks in between him and the people who are playing with him. And it's just, there's that moment when you're just like, oh my God, this is the good stuff. And you lose track of whatever the quality of the recording is, because it's like the least important thing in that moment. There's a man singing a wonderful song that feels very natural. Everything about it feels supernatural. And then when the harmonies kick in, I don't know who the people are that are singing with him. I take the time and find that out, and I will. But they sound so good when they're singing, he's the president, but I don't care. Whoa, whoa. Those voices together. It's one of those things people don't talk about when they talk about Blaze Foley, is how much richness to his voice. And even though the tonal range isn't really large, he's able to just put so much emotion into it. And his voice with his friends singing with him is just stunning to me. And that's just some live board recording or something from, it's amazing. I love that about him. And there's a moment when you're driving down the road and you just kind of get sucked into it. You're just like, man, this is the good stuff. This is the real stuff. And it's amazing to me he wasn't more popular, or popular at all, during his lifetime. Maybe if he would have lived a few more years or not gotten his own way, he would be a lot more popular. If you hear what sounds like gunshots in the background, it's actually one of my neighbors down the street is getting a new roof put on their house. And I thought they were done for the day, and I started recording, and the nail gun started up again. So there's not a drive-by happening or anything like that. In case you're worried, don't call the cops. But I wanted to, Girth in that video talked about Blaze Foley's funeral, and I started looking up old newspaper archives, and I found this from the Austin American-Statesman, and it's about Blaze's funeral. And this is February 11th, 1989. The headline says, Blaze of Glory. There's a picture, and I'll try to put it right here. It's a very hard to distinguish what it is, but it's Blaze's coffin. And there's the typed up words to If I Could Only Fly that are duct taped to his coffin. And it looks like there's some flowers, maybe wildflowers laying on top of it. And there's a lot of duct tape around it. And I'll put that up here if I can so you guys can see that. But it says, Blaze Foley's funeral, like his casket, was a tribute to good taste, duct tape, and a love for deep songs of feeling. Foley's February 1st death came during the rebirth of his career. It's a staff photo by Casey Monahan. Now this article is in the country folk section of the Austin American-Statesman, and it's written by Casey Monahan. And there's a quote. What says, Blaze of Glory, friends, musicians remember singer-songwriter Foley as an honest but troubled man. And there's a quote from Lucinda Williams that says, Blaze Foley was a genius and a beautiful loser. And the article says, Blaze Foley was really two people. There was the caring, loving, altruist, and then there was the ornery, drinking poet. The former killed him. The latter always was killing him. Both were tempered by wit and humor, and both got him into trouble. His talent and songs came from deep within, so much so that it often was painful for him to sing them. His shooting death on February 1st came during the rebirth of his career. He had recorded the Live at the Austin Outhouse cassette. That's awesome. He'd recorded the Live at the Austin Outhouse cassette and nearly was finished with the overdubs at Bee Creek Studio for a new album on Heartland Records. This is a quote. It says, "It was hard for us to record If I Could Only Fly," Bee Creek engineer Spencer Starnes said about Foley's most remembered song. Because every time he would sing it, about halfway through, he'd break down into tears. He wrote beautiful songs. While the works of visual artists have definable beginnings and ends, songwriters must continually repeat their creations, often re-experiencing emotions long since past. With the possible exception of Girl Scout cookies, he never wrote a pop song. He was popular precisely because he tried to be so unpopular, so unruly. He often was written off by many who thought he was crazy. He was a champion of those he felt the closest to, the downtrodden, and the songwriters who maintained their integrity despite success, hard luck, or chemical dependency. This is the letters on the page are out of focus, and my entire world is a bit out of focus, so it's kind of hard to read. So if I mess it up, I apologize to you guys. It says he loved Timbuk 3's Pat and Barbara McDonald because they handled popular success with so much integrity. Do you guys remember Timbuk 3? The future's so bright, I have to wear shades. They I don't know. I think they aged really well. I've listened to some Timbuk 3 in the last year or two, and I think it aged really well. And it's good to know they were friends with Blaze Foley. The Friday before his death, while he and I sat together at the Austin City Limits taping of Timbuk 3, he told me he thought Pat McDonald's songwriting peer was Bob Dylan. Foley knew. He'd listened to Dylan's songs for 25 years, loved his talent, and met him at Electric Ladyland on South Congress Avenue. Blaze Foley met Bob Dylan. Blaze had an ear for talent and a belief that you should only speak about what you know, through your heart or your experience is true. I don't think he ever wrote a song for any reason other than feeling. He thought Reagan and his supporters were jerks, so he wrote Oval Room. He thought people should forget everything once in a while and get sweet, so he wrote Girl Scout cookies. He thought flying was possibly the only way to rid himself of heartache, so he wrote If I Could Only Fly. People only fly in their dreams. Blaze was one of the few people who could translate the dream of self-sufficient flight into the reality of song. He's flying now. Blaze was booked at Austin's premier folk venue, the Cactus Cafe, only twice this decade, which is a shame. Some people in the local music scene didn't have it in them to take him seriously, and he didn't make it easy for them if they tried. There was a time when he was barred from nearly every bar in Austin. He was a gentle outlaw, and he belonged in a venue that survives on funk alone, the Austin Outhouse. It was the only place in town that consistently booked him. On the surface, he was too unreliable, too weird, too drunk, or all three. I will say, I talked to Griff in the office there at the Cactus Cafe after I played there one night, and I was just asking him about Towns and about Blaze, and he was telling me that it was this ongoing thing throughout the years where Blaze would show up for shows and would always get in free, and he would try to, like, man, make him pay, you know, everybody's got to pay when they get in here, but he would magically always end up on the guest list and get in free. And There was one particular time, I'm fuzzy about the details. I think it was a Towns show, and he thought that he finally had him thwarted where he was going to have to pay to get in, and somehow he ends up on stage with Towns or something like that. But I'm messing up the punchline, but I remember that conversation, and them saying the Cactus Cafe remind me of it. But says, I remember the reaction I got from a local booking agent and band manager when a photo of Foley appeared in the American Statesman's nightlife listing. Blaze Foley, he said with disbelief. You ran a photo of Blaze Foley? As if he'd written him off long ago and could not or would not try to understand his art. Even the police didn't take him seriously. Blaze's guitarist from 77 to 81, Girth remembers that one night we were coming back from a gig and we saw a fire. Blaze got on a payphone and reported it to the police, and they asked him who he was, and when he said Blaze Foley, they hung up. That's lonesome. His wit could make the most accepted practice seem absurd. He could reduce a given to something that takes away from the truth. Blaze had an uncanny ability to turn things around, to make you scratch your head and wonder how you could have looked at something an accepted way for so long. Police called Blaze's death an unfortunate homicide. Blaze would have laughed at that, then gotten mad as hell. To someone like Blaze, there was no such beast as a fortunate homicide. Larry Monroe, one of the few disc jockeys in America willing and able to play Blaze's music on the radio, will have a second tribute to Foley Sunday at 9 p.m. on KUT. On February 26 at 3 p.m. to 1 a.m., a memorial concert at the Austin Outhouse will feature many of his friends and fellow songwriters. A $900 debt remains from his funeral. His Live at the Austin Outhouse cassette will be available, with $1 from each sale going to support the homeless. Some of the tape's receipts will pay for the cost of finishing the tape's packaging, and the remainder will go to his mother. A percentage of the door will be used to keep that still struggling venue afloat. At Blaze's inspiring funeral, his friend Daryl Harris said, I don't think there's a person here who hasn't been embarrassed by his honesty. And songwriter and close friend Pat Mears said later that he could look right through you. If you weren't an honest person, you couldn't handle his eyes. He had a personal relationship with everyone he met. Everyone felt that they knew him well. He had that ability to be personal with anyone. I felt like I could be exactly who I was with Blaze. And that's the end of the article. But this is an absolute beautiful send-off, and seriously, much love and respect to Casey Monahan for writing that about a person who was just written off in their lifetime, and history has ended up on the side of Casey Monahan, I'm afraid. But I remember the reaction I got from a local booking agent and band member when a photo of Foley appeared in the Austin American-Statesman. And the guy says, Blaze Foley, why are you running that? That's just crazy. I'd like to know who that person was. But that was in the Austin American-Statesman, February 11th, 1989. Let me get my coffee over here. So I'm curious, what's your favorite Blaze Foley song? What's your first memory of Girth Morlix? My first memory of Girth, I don't remember how I first heard Blaze. It was, I think, probably reading some Townes Van Zandt interview and him talking about Blaze Foley, and then me looking him up and finding his music. I believe that's kind of how that happened. But my first memory of Blaze Foley is watching Lucinda Williams playing with her band on Austin City Limits. I thought that was 1989. I'm terrible at saying what year something happened. I mean, I'm really bad at it. But I thought that was 1989, and I asked Girth, and he said it was more like 92 or something like that. But I remember watching Lucinda, and I'm like, man, she's great. You know, these are great songs. this is the real stuff, you know, just really being taken back. And as it goes on, I'm kind of like, who's that guitar player? That guitar player is pretty damn all right. And I really was, I thought Girth was absolutely great in that moment. And when I say that, it says a lot about the kind of guitar player that I dig. It's a person who is there not to show you all their dweedlies and, you know, and how fast and flashy they can be or whatever. It's somebody who is there to serve the song and the singer, you know, and to support and be part of a unit, something that's happening there, and try to elevate it musically. Girth was one of those guys where you could sing every single line that he would play on guitar. You know, if you couldn't sing it, it didn't seem like he'd play it. And I've always liked those kind of guitar players. It's like the kind of people that would play with Dylan. You know, it's a George Harrison thing. It's a Mike Campbell thing, you know. And I like those kind of guitar players. I like a lot of kind of guitar players. But when you talk about somebody you want to play with, that really knocked me off. And you can hear now somebody's weed eating down the street. It's we're destined to have some background noise in this, and I apologize. But from there, I always thought of Girth as the guy playing with Lucinda, and I thought he was great. And then I got a record from Slade Cleaves that was broke down. It was the first thing I'd heard from Slade, and I absolutely loved that record. I just thought everything about it was really great. All the songs were great. Slade was great. And the production really stood out to me because it seemed like it took Slade and his voice, which is a great thing, and these great songs, and just kind of framed them and supported them. Like Slade's at the center of it. Nothing drew attention away from him, but everything just sat right with it. So I really loved the sound of that record. And then I got to looking, and I'm like, it was produced by Girth Morlix. And I'm like, what? And like, Girth, and I realized that was the guy that I'd seen on Austin City Limits that was the great guitar player. So I had two moments where I was won over by Girth, the guitar player, and then I was also won over by Girth, the producer. And I later talked to, I talked to either Slade or Girth. I don't remember which. Girth. I call him Girth. Sorry about that. I later talked to either Slade or Girth. I don't remember which one. It was probably Girth, and said that was recorded onto ADAT. And I think it was Slade. And it's just in his house, you know. But to me, it sounded really great and cool. And it was because of the performances and the choices made. It wasn't because of a bunch of gear and stuff like that, which is a great lesson. These were people making records, you know, the best way they could, and doing a very good job of it. And Girth went on to, we're in producing a few Ray Wiley Hubbard records, Mary Gauthier, you know, a few different ones. So at one point, this is a long time ago, but there was talk that I should get a producer to make a record, and I needed to make a list of a couple people that I might want to be produced by. And the truth is, I'm not very excited about the idea of working with a producer, because I just kind of have my own ideas, a strong opinion of who I am and all of that stuff. So I just wasn't the best choice for that. But I said, well, what about Girth? You know, and I thought yeah, I'd like to work with Girth. And like I said, this is like 20 years ago. This is a while ago. And so we reached out. I made some demos. I had just gotten I'd gotten the first Pro Tools thing with was it an M-Box? It's like a 2-input thing, and you put it in a laptop. And I just got like a SM58 or something and played and made demos of these songs. And I'll tell you right now, I knew right then I was just kind of like, these are pretty bad. They sounded terrible. I mean, they sounded really, really terrible. And I was so worried about that the performances weren't that great. And I think, I don't know, they were pretty bad. But I was like, hell with it. So we sent it to Girth, and he passed and said he wasn't interested. And I'm like, okay. And life went on, and we didn't work together. I met Girth later, and the first time I remember him seeing me live, we were both in Leicester, England, and we played on the same bill at the Musician. And they do these things. They do these things where they call them double bills, where we both make the same money, and but somebody plays before somebody else. So, and I think I was the one that played first, so it looked like I'm opening. So that's pretty much what it is. But we make the same money or something. But it was packed, really good show, and I went over really well, and Girth watched my whole thing. And I remember afterwards, we jumped in a taxi together to go back to the hotel, and we're like talking really fast because we know we don't have any time. And he says, "Man, are those songs you played tonight, were they on that demo you sent me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think a lot of them were." And he just kind of shook his head, and he's like, "I don't know what I was thinking. I should have produced that record." And I'm like, "Those demos were terrible, Girth. They were terrible." And he's like, "No, the songs are good." You know, I didn't help myself with the demos, but that was fun. And we had this quick thing of like independent musicians who are swapping like really quickly, like, "What have you tried? What did it work? Did you play over here? How did they treat you?" You know, that kind of talk. It was really fun going back and forth. And that was in Leicester, England, in a taxi. And then I would see Girth in Austin. I remember showing up to I'd go to shows or something like that, and I'd see Girth, and I got to hang out with him a couple times. I remember one night at the G&S Lounge. You guys remember the G&S Lounge? It was a really cool place, because it's just 7 or 8 years ago, you could walk in there. I remember seeing David Olney, and I'm going in, and David and Sergio are playing, and it fills up, and all of a sudden you look around and you realize, oh wow, this is old Austin, and this isn't new as all these older hippie people just showing up to see David Olney. This isn't what you see at clubs, you know, around Austin. And I'm not putting Austin down. Just Austin was once a certain thing, and I dig that thing that it was. And it's so neat when you just happen to walk in and you're like, oh my God, this is old Austin. You know, it's happening right now in this room. We're seeing the ghosts of it. And I've had those moments in Nashville where you walk in and you realize, oh my God, this is old Nashville. This is the place I moved, you know, to be part of and to witness. But I remember being there once. I think Girth was playing. I can't remember, but I was standing there with Girth and Jimmy LaFave. Yeah, Girth was playing. It was, Kevin Triplett had finished the Girth documentary, and he was selling them right there. He had like a little merch table selling them. So I was standing right next to Girth when I bought the DVD of the Blaze documentary, and I got to hand the guy that made the documentary the money. And if you see that out there, if it's available, buy it, because he went to like a ridiculous amount of effort. I don't know him at all, but you hear things, and I don't know if it ever made the money back put into it. It's not the sort of thing you make money when you make documentaries. You do it out of passion. And him putting that out probably went a long way towards making Blaze be remembered like he is now. So if you see that out there, man, buy it. You know, buy it from him. If he's got a website, you know, maybe I'll try to put a link below if I think about it. But if it's out there and you dig Blaze, even if you've seen it before, buy it. Just support people who make these things, and they'll make more. Just wanted to throw that in as a sidebar. But that's I got to buy it right from the guy. I have it around here somewhere. I haven't watched it in years. I actually was asking Girth questions about, Blaze's artwork. I had no memory of that, and he's like, well, it's in that documentary, and they show some of it. Oh, okay. Well, I should have known that. I just haven't watched it in so long that it didn't catch up with me. But I just wanted to say that. And I ended up, let's see, I interviewed Girth once for my podcast. He told some of the Blaze stories and some other stuff. We met up in Austin at my buddy Cameron Smith's apartment. There's like a house next to his that he was able to use during South by, and I interviewed a lot of people there that year. And Girth came over, and we did the first interview in the podcast there, and then Girth came over to my house in East Nashville once, and we talked about Marty Robbins' Gunfighter Ballads album. And I contacted him ahead of time. He's like, well, what do you want to talk about? And I said, you dig that Marty Robbins album, don't you? And he's like, oh yeah, it's one of my favorite all time. I'm like, let's talk about that album. And he's kind of, really? Like, yeah, let's talk about that. We don't have to talk about us. We can talk about that. And Girth came over to the house, and we talked about that, and it was fun. It was one of the more popular episodes of the podcast. And then afterwards, we went over to a restaurant that I don't remember the name of. It went out of business. It was by Mas Tacos, just around the corner. I forget the name of it, but it went out of business. And my neighbor Jessica was the waiter, and sat there and just talked and shot the shit for a while. It was nice, just a nice East Nashville evening. And so I hadn't seen Girth in a while, but I got to see him play the Ray Wiley Hubbard, played bass with Ray on Austin City Limits, which it was freaking great to see Austin City Limits finally put Ray on there. It was great that Girth got to be part of it. But we met up in Nashville and recorded this interview that I'll be posting more of. And we tried to get together for quite a while, and he lives in Austin. I'm up here in Indiana, going back and forth to Nashville, and he was driving to Canada. And he's like, I'm going to pass through Nashville around this date. And I'm like, well, tell me the date, and I'll drive to Nashville, and we'll do the interview down there. So I drove down the night before, stayed at a hotel. The next morning, got up, went over, interviewed Girth, got to see him, and then I actually went over to visit my buddy Mangler, Phil Kaufman, for a little bit. And I got in the car and I drove 5 hours back to Indianapolis. So when you're watching that, realize I drove 5 hours down to Nashville and then 5 hours back just to do that interview. And that's made possible by the people that support me on Patreon and channel members and stuff like that. And I appreciate them, and I appreciate y'all doing it. But check out that interview. There's a few different older interviews of people talking about talking about Blaze, and I think you might dig them. There might be, maybe I will link one up here. I'll probably link Girth right here, and click on that and watch it, and I'll see you somewhere down the road. Much love to you.